on investing in yourself. I mean, you're talking to somebody who spent over $400,000 in their own education. So you need to figure out what you're doing, and you need to make sure that you're making that investment on a daily basis. Now, you know, you're talking to someone who's an alma mater of 4 different schools. I'm not saying it has to necessarily be that same old school way, but find yourself mentors, pick up books, read. You need to make sure that you're getting an education, because you're gonna come across to the world different than anyone else has. You need to have that experience and education that's gonna help change people's lives. And without that, no one's gonna invest back in you. The second rule of building wealth is specialize. And I can't say this enough. So let's put that in context. If you were going to medical school, so I deal with clients that are general practitioners, and then I have neurologists. And when you look at the wealth that's been earned by the neurologist versus the general practitioner, it's probably 10x over a lifetime, right? And that's just a context where there's a lot of generalists out there. So whatever it is that you're looking to do, I always talk to my other advisors at my firm about ultra specialization. And for example, we had all of our advisors at a conference the other week. And we were asking them, what is your specialty, right? And so we went around the table, and some were saying, I specialize in retirement income. Some were saying, I specialize in lawyers. And I went to one of our newest advisors, Levi. So Levi is somebody who, former NFL player, he was number 6 first-round draft pick, signed a $62 million contract with the Arizona Cardinals. And I asked Levi, I said, Levi, what do you specialize in? And what he said is, I specialize in NFL players. Not only NFL players, but I specialize in NFL players primarily in the first 25 picks of the draft. And I specialize in NFL players who come from a background where money is brand new to them. You know, they were hand to mouth. You know, they never owned a home. You know, they were struggling to make ends meet. And I chose those people because I identify with them. I was those people. So when I get into a room with other financial advisors and I talk about my specialization, and we want to look around and ask who could raise their hand and say that they're more qualified to talk to that client from a position that I can, there's no hands that go up. Now, compare that to the guy who said he specializes in retirement income. If I brought in 32,000 investment advisors into a room, guess what? All their hands are going to go up. So it's that specialization that people are willing to pay for. So when you're going to school, you want to think about that. If you're an entrepreneur, you want to think about that. How do you grab that niche, and how do you make an impact in those particular people's lives that's greater than anyone else can? The third rule for building wealth, you have to have a strategy. As CEO of a firm, my whole time, probably 90% of the time I spend is on strategy. And once you have that strategy in place, obviously having strategic objectives along the way. And to put that into context, think about driving to some far off town you've never heard of, 2 states away, and getting in that car and taking off without Google Maps or some other kind of navigation. I mean, you might potentially get there, but imagine some of the trials and tribulations you're gonna have to go to find your way there. And yet, a lot of times I see entrepreneurs, I see people 2nd, 3rd years into college, and they're thinking, okay, I might want to do this or might want to do that, but there's really no key strategy. And so when they're even coming to me and they say, what do you think my troubles are? Where are the problems that I'm having? And I ask, what is the strategy? Who are you trying to reach? What are you doing? It really comes down to they're selling some type of product, or they're trying to compete with the guy next door. What you need to do is have a very strong value proposition. Put that into a roadmap of where you are today, where you're trying to go, and set targets along the way. What are you trying to accomplish next month, 3 months down the line, a year from now? And when you get to those inflection points, if you haven't got there, that's the time where it really makes sense to have a mentor or someone where you go back to the drawing board and say, hey, look, I thought I was going to get this type of client. We got to here, and here's the challenges that I have. We didn't meet that first objective. But without that roadmap, without those strategic objectives, it's very difficult to see where you're going to go to get to that next level. Rule number 4, I think this especially hits close to me as an entrepreneur and someone who kind of struggled at the beginning with my business and eventually kind of found my way. A lot of people come to me and say, what do I need to do? What's the niche? What do I need to find out? And what I tell them is, first identify who your target customer is. Where do you think you might be able to have a competitive advantage? So, let's say, for example, you grew up in Nebraska, maybe it's dealing with fellow Cornhuskers or whatever it is. And once you identify them, find out what are some of the needs that they have that are not really being met currently. And that's really where I think the success happens. So from my standpoint, when I started a wealth management firm, at first I was 27 years old. I wanted to be all things to all people. If you had money, if you could put a breath on the mirror, I was going to take your money and do something for you. And then when I realized as time went on, when people are getting these multi-million-dollar clients and I really wasn't getting there, I was realizing there was really nothing special about my business. We really were all things to all people, which at the end of the day leaves you being nothing. And so when I really started figuring out who we wanted to work with and having conversations with those people, which today is the high net worth and ultra high net worth investor, we sit down with our clients and we want to understand where are you trying to go, what things are important to you. You know, for example, a lot of clients might say, hey, we were investing in stock indexes, but we found out they were investing in tobacco or alcohol or those types of things that really just weren't in alignment with them. So when we sat back and looked at our customers, we created a solution where they don't wait on hold. They have our direct cell phones. We build portfolios from the ground up to include or exclude anything that they want. Very personalized, individualized service. And you got to understand, when you're dealing with high net worth people, these are people that used to having the carpet rolled out for them. So when they get pushed into a call center environment or they're getting put into these cookie cutter portfolios, that's where things kind of fall off the track. So when you're looking to go out and create something, figure out who your customer is and figure out how you can really differentiate yourself and make those people's lives better. Rule number 5, and this especially I think pertains to entrepreneurs again, is when you're starting a business, look outside of your industry for inspiration. And I think a really great and kind of timely story about that is the story of Restoration Hardware. So think about what's going on right now. Everyone's locked down, they're worried about the economy, people are tightening their belts, they're not looking to spend a lot of money right now, yet when you look at the company Restoration Hardware, they just reported earnings, they're doing great. Their customers are buying a lot of furniture, and you think, well, if you can't even go into a store, how is Restoration Hardware doing so well? And I think the key is they made some big changes probably about, I would say, 6 or 7 years ago. And so when you walked into a Restoration Hardware store, all of a sudden, there was nothing on the floor that you could buy. Everything had to be ordered online. Every person that came up to you, it wasn't taking you to a cash register, they had an iPad and they were scanning through things with you. And so what they did was they took that Apple iPad, they took that cool type of culture, Amazon type of delivery service, they brought that to the furniture business, which before was more of a chore, right? You'd go to the furniture store and you'd look around, to where it was really kind of cool being in this more innovative environment. And what that did was it's something different. It retrained their customer how they purchase things, right? They knew that if they went into a Restoration Hardware store, they weren't going home with anyone. It was going to be ordered online. And what was smart about that is when we experience a situation like this today, people know that, hey, Restoration Hardware, it's all online. I've experienced those things in store before. They train the customer to have a different type of behavior. So they're buying furniture in a different way. It's a higher price point, even remarkably speaking, versus other furniture. And by thinking outside, not what was the furniture store down the street doing, but what were some of the innovative companies doing out there that was changing consumer behavior, that allowed them to be very successful, even in a very challenging environment like today. Rule number 6, and this really is my all-time favorite rule, and that rule is be able to tell a story about yourself, your brand, your product, and make sure that people hear it. And I can tell you from an example, I'm one of those people where I started a wealth management industry, and I used to look at some of these people on TV, and I'd say, well, that guy doesn't know a lot any more than me. And yet, when I looked at the rankings, this guy was making a lot more money than me. He had a lot more business coming through his door. And the reason being was maybe he wasn't any smarter than me, but he was able to tell a story. And he was doing that on a platform that was national television. So people were hearing about that. So having the greatest product or being the smartest person in the room, if nobody else hears about it, doesn't equate to revenue. So it's once we took our firm, created a story, got that out on a national broadcast level, we really saw things skyrocket. And that's just how we've been trained from the beginning, is telling stories around a campfire. Loads and loads of data doesn't impress people. Tell a story that touches people's heart and make sure that everyone hears that story. The final rule of building wealth, we talked about all these things, is I know you don't want to hear this, but you got to be patient, right? Greatness takes a lot of time. If you think about Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, Joe Montana, these people were training from the time they were 3, 4 years old. And that equates to things in business. When you look at business leaders like Warren Buffett, it takes a lot of time to build expertise. And I think what people really make the mistake of doing is they jump ship way too early. I can tell you, I've been in my industry since I was 19 years old. I started out as an intern. And I look at some of the people who got into my industry, left after 3 or 4 years when the going got tough. I'm still getting calls from those people today congratulating me, and they're stuck in jobs that are, probably the same job they could have honestly had 2 or 3 years out of college, because they're always looking for that next great thing. So like I said, greatness takes time. Invest in yourself. Look at all these other rules that we talked about. Put some skill into your game and be patient. If you do it long enough, you impact enough people's lives, eventually the money is going to show up. And I think that's the number one thing that people need to keep in mind no matter what they're doing. So with these rules, we talked about a lot of things, and along the way, there's a lot of books that I've read that have really inspired me, that I'm grabbing this information for, that I want to make sure that they get full credit, and I share this with you. So after this, there's going to be a link below to some of my favorite books that I think are definitely worth taking the $20 or $30 to spend your money on, or go to Audible and get them. And make sure if you like the content that you subscribe, and there's going to be a lot more good information to come.